I've had this YouTube channel for about 3 years now, and if you read some of the comments, you'll find that some people believe that I'm paid by and in the pocket of Rolex, Tudor, Omega, Longines, Studio Underdog, Christopher Ward, Patek, Vacheron, AP, FP Journe, Richard Mille, IWC, Breitling, Nomos, San Martin, Swatch Group, LVMH, Richemont, the Rich, the Swiss watch industry, the Swiss watch industry complex, the West, Europe, the EU, China, and the Chinese Communist Party. You name it, apparently I and other YouTubers like me are all in the pockets of some watch cabal or another. So I thought, let's have a conversation about how us watch YouTubers actually make money. What's the business model? And are we all in the pockets of the lizard people? So let's dive in.
Late last year, I was able to shoot a watch shopping episode with one of the biggest creators.
I think this ultimately reveals I'm
We also have
but
a
I couldn't imagine many people are.
The very first place that earns a watch YouTuber money is ad revenue on YouTube. This works based on two things: views and how many of them you get, and earnings per view, or as YouTube calls it, revenue per meal. Multiply one by the other and you have your monthly earnings. So how do you get views? You make content people want to watch. Okay, you're probably looking for a little bit more detail than that. You get more views by talking about things that more people are interested in. Marques Brownlee talks about Apple products. That gets him 60 million views every single month. Teddy Baldessar talks about watches and it gets him 8 million views on a good month. Not as many people want to watch videos about watches as about iPhones. Within watches, you talk about watches that people are interested in. Rolex is a more popular brand, so it will get more views than Grupo Force. Tudor gets more views than Bremont, and the Hamilton Khaki gets more views than a Hanhart Preventer. The more you focus on the stuff that is known and popular and brands that are well established, the better views you in general are going to get. Within watches, there are casual viewers and enthusiasts. There are not a lot of enthusiasts, but for a YouTube channel, they are repeat business. They are loyal and they keep coming back. The downside of enthusiasts is that they have niche interests. Casual viewers are not enthusiasts. They're not loyal. They're just looking for a watch. They watch a video or two, they make up their minds, and they never come back. But there's a volume in casual viewers. So you've got somebody like the Urban Gentry. He talks about niche brands. He talks to enthusiasts. He doesn't get a lot of casual viewers, but has a loyal enthusiast base. Overall, that doesn't get him a ton of views. Then you've got Nico Leonard. He is, relative to TGV, not a guy that has a lot of enthusiast viewers, but he talks about stuff that is interesting to a huge casual audience. So he gets a lot of views overall. Then you've got the revenue side of the equation. What defines how much money YouTube sends your way? Simple. How much money your viewer has. YouTube doesn't know exactly how much money each viewer has, but they've got some good demographics to go by. Gender. Men spend more money on stupid things, so they are good to advertise to. Age. People between 35 and 45 have a lot of money and they spend it. People over 45, 50, they have a lot of money, but they spend less of it. And people under 35 have no money. Geography. People in the West and in high-income countries, the US, Western Europe, Singapore, Hong Kong, they have more money, and in general, compared to somebody from Senegal or Bangladesh or Cuba, they are going to bring in more revenue. Finally, volume. And this is linked to views, but generally, if a topic is interesting to a lot of people, then advertisers are going to be willing to pay a premium. So if your content appeals to this mix of demographics, you're going to make more money. And who is this demographic, by the way? Well, it's your generic, average, middle-of-the-road luxury watch buyer with a significant amount of disposable income. That means if you want to get a lot of views and make a lot of money, you talk about Rolex, Tudor, Omega, IWC. And you see the connection? So let's take a couple of YouTubers. Nico, Teddy, Adrian, the Mad Watch Collector, and the Urban Gentry. First on views, Teddy is at the top, followed by Nico. Then a fair distance behind them is the Mad Watch Collector, followed by Adrian, and a fair distance behind him is TGV. Who do these YouTubers focus on? TGV, it's niche watches with a slant towards low-cost and affordable non-generic watch brands. Adrian, it's middle-of-the-road luxury watch brands like Rolex, Tudor, and Omega. Nico, he mainly talks about luxury and high-end brands. Teddy talks about a lot of brands, but the majority of his content is from the value space of around $1,000 up to Rolex. The Mad Watch Collector, it's affordable Casios and other entry and lower mid-range watches. And as for their slant on content, TGV is about detailed reviews, historical facts, and in-depth deep dives on niche interests. Adrian is about product information, general overviews, product releases. The Mad Watch Collector is about in-depth reviews. Nico, pure entertainment with little to no content depth. There are no reviews, it's just fun. And Teddy, he does a mix of reviews, but his channel is slanted heavily towards explainers, guides, and options with a little bit of entertainment mixed in. Which all means TGV is for niche enthusiasts that give relatively low views and low earnings potential. Adrian has a mix of casuals and enthusiasts with a very high earnings potential stemming from his slant towards known brands. The Mad Watch Collector has got a broad audience with a mixed audience with a middle range of earnings potential. Nico, it's a massively casual audience, but they're going to skew younger than that 35 to 45-year-old demographic. They're not there to buy, so the earnings potential is lower than you would think. And Teddy, he's got a massive casual audience relative to the others with a very high earnings potential because he's got such a huge reach. If you are new to my channel or you're just new to watches, then please consider subscribing to my channel. On this channel, I talk about everything watch related, and as per the sort of content of the video, I am in nobody's pocket. I am unbiased and I just say what I think, and I like to share my hobby with you as well. Please subscribe. Thanks a ton. Then you've got the costs. What does all that filming cost? Well, it's more expensive than you think. Initially, you need a camera, you need decent lighting, decent audio, a computer for editing, plus a heck of a lot of storage space, plus a lot of time. A lot of time. Mad Watch Collector, TGV, myself, we do everything ourselves. We don't pay for editors, studios, other stuff. Adrian, to my knowledge, has people on the payroll that help with, among other things, editing and thumbnails. Teddy, he's got a huge staff that develops content, films, maintains a permanent studio, shoots B-roll, edits, and moderates a community. He may generate a lot of views, but there's a big cost setup behind his channel. More than anything though, all YouTubers invest time, which may not have a direct cost, but the moment you quit your job, then you really need to make sure you can have a stable income on par with what you were making before. The break even for that point is going to be different. I watched Britt Pierce's video a couple of years ago where she shared her earnings breakdown. The thing that I remember most was her job at the time, which was working at a Christian youth center or something to that effect. She was making something around £2,000 to £3,000 per month. Assuming she's making $10 per 1,000 views right now, for her, it was a no-brainer to go full-time. The same for Adrian. He worked as a learning and development manager at, among others, Apple. Now, it's been 6-7 years since he last was an L&D manager, but I know, because I have a background in HR, that today an L&D manager is going to make somewhere between £4,000 and £5,000 per month. With his current views, he's also likely making more on YouTube than being an L&D manager. Now, Nico isn't entirely dependent on his YouTube. He has a watch business as well. The same for Teddy, but we'll get back to that revenue stream. Because on top of YouTube earnings, it's about how you can diversify your revenue stream if you want to turn it into a business. And you want to diversify your revenue stream because you don't want to be dependent on only one source of revenue. The next thing you can do is do paid ads for Squarespace or Athletic Greens or Made in Cookware and all sorts of stuff that has nothing to do with watches. The earnings from this roughly follows the RPM and demographic logic of YouTube. So typically a brand will look to see how many views you typically get on a video, and they will offer you some multiple of RPM on those views. So if you typically in a week get 50,000 views on your video, they may pay you $10 per meal. So that's a flat fee of $500 for an ad. The more views you generate and the better your demographic is, the more you can charge. But for YouTube, it's going to be somewhere from $500 to maybe $2,500, $3,000 for one ad in one video. You can also make affiliate shares, so those little discount codes you see in the descriptions. It's a little up to the individual YouTuber to figure out which option works best for them. There are also some watch brands that do this paid ad thing as well. IFL watches are a good example of this. You see them every now and again with a new drop, and whenever they have a drop, you'll see several YouTubers talking about this new watch that has just been released. Britt, Nico, pretty sure Teddy, Adrian have all done them as well. Those are paid, And incidentally, if you're living where I live, the video should have clearly been marked as having sponsored content. Most YouTubers in this space are pretty good at being open that they are doing sponsored content. And I'd argue you have to, as a viewer, be fairly dense to not know these kinds of spots or ads. To my knowledge, there are not a lot of brands that go down this route. You are not going to see Rolex or Omega or Tudor paying for this kind of content. When Teddy did the release of the Ground Scrounger, I don't believe for a second that Rolex paid him to do that video. What he got was preferential access, but he wasn't paid. That was a scoop. Generally, the brands that have reached out to me and offered paid collabs like this are much smaller. It's Asian brands and it's Chinese brands that are very willing to do it. Established brands, not that much. Watch gifts. Last year, I did a couple of reviews where I loaned watches. Zelos offered for me to keep the watch. I didn't keep it, but they did offer it. Christopher Ward have never offered to give me a watch. Neither did IWC or Nomos. Generally, being offered a watch happens only with very small brands and very affordable brands. Chinese factory brands are very open about offering the watch, and there are YouTubers that have channels based entirely on reselling the gifted watches they have received. My own experience is that once the MSRP goes above $1,000, there are fewer, if not any, offers at all to keep the watch. As an example, for the IWC video I did of the perpetual calendar, no, I was not offered to keep a $40,000 watch. I actually had to sign that if I lost it or damaged it when it was in my property, then I would have to replace it fully with my own money. So I was very careful with that watch. This then brings me to something that isn't earnings related, but is still relevant. Creative control. For Zelos, for Nomos, for IWC, for Christopher Ward, none of them have had any creative influence on my videos. They did not see the video before I uploaded it, and there were no conditions attached to the loan of the watch. For Nomos and IWC, like I said, I had to sign a document stating that if I lost or damaged the watches while they were in my possession, I would be fully responsible for replacing them. But I have still yet to meet a brand that expected to have creative influence on my review or comments. I generally think that is the case based on my conversations with people in the industry. I know that was different a couple of years back, but today, pretty much anyone I reach out to, they do not try to influence my creative control whatsoever. What is always an open question for anybody doing reviews, and that is watches, iPhones, cars, is the question of access. No brand in their right mind is going to loan anyone watches if they just consistently bash on their products. Maintaining some level of journalistic integrity is important. And it's a balance, because if you come across as compromised, people won't watch your content. And if you just bash for the sake of bashing, you won't get access to the watches. What this means, though, is that generally you can expect a reasonably balanced review from most reviewers in most situations. Both sides, so the manufacturers and the YouTubers, know that it's in their interest to allow for journalistic freedom and not to abuse the relationship. So, when Teddy gets preferential access to the new Ground Scrounger, he wasn't paid. At least I don't think so. But that was a huge scoop for his channel. That's the value. And if there was a situation where Rolex might have demanded that no other brands were featured in the same video, then this might be the one. Specifically in a scenario like that, there's no doubt that there's at least some sort of implicit pressure. Just like when NVIDIA has clear requirements to Linus and Gamers Nexus and others to talk about DLSS and ray tracing and path tracing and all that kind of stuff in a very specific way. You can make money on merch. Linus Tech Tips does it. ID Guy does it. Adrian does it. They are selling stuff on the side and leveraging their own brand to push sales of other products. For Andrew Morgan and ID Guy, it's more enthusiast merch in the vein of coffee cups and t-shirts, but Adrian Barker, on the other hand, has gone much more aggressive. His straps are available in Time and Tide stores, and it's a more fleshed out commercial product and not so much just some fun merch on the side. There's nothing wrong with that, by the way. It's just clear that Adrian is running it as more of a business compared to some other YouTubers. Teddy has made a watch with Brew, Nico with Maine, Andrew Morgan was at least associated with a Belcanto from Christopher Ward, and Adrian Barker is apparently going to be releasing a watch as well. This is a clear commercial earning stream, and basically they make some share of the revenue on the sales of the watch. It's going to differ from brand to brand, but for Teddy, the price, as far as I could tell, for his version of the watch from Brew was a little bit higher than the regular Brew model. My guess is you take 50% of that price premium and multiply it by the number of watches sold, and that's his share of the earnings. You can get into all sorts of cost-sharing models. You can build cliffs to ensure that there's no payout if the watch tanks. But in general, just like Tom Cruise, you take a cut of the box office earnings. For Nico, the initial estimates for his jump hour watch was about 2,500 watches sold. But rumor has it that a lot more were sold. But let's just say his share was $20 per watch. That's $50,000. At $100 per watch, he made $250,000. Then there are watch partnerships, which is not building a watch, but other stuff. So, not long ago, first Teddy, then Britt, and then Adrian made a video about their visits to Breitling's manufacturer. And I saw the comments and I saw the questions, were they paid? And Adrian even wrote as a response on one of his videos, yes, it was paid. I can't tell though if he was joking or not, or he was referring to something else, but at least he wrote it was paid. And basically there's two things that probably were in play in this kind of collaboration. The first one is I would put my money on them definitely having been paid in terms of accommodation and transport to the facility. And then maybe they were paid to do the actual videos, but they might not have been. What we have to think about is, does it have to be paid necessarily? And the question comes down to, what do the different parties get out of this? Breitling gets exposure to an audience that otherwise doesn't hear about them that often. And Britt, Teddy, and Adrian get credibility because they are the ones that get access, which is, it has a clear value to their channel to be established as trusted voices in the community. Going through influencers, which I am, and Teddy is, and Adrian is, and Britt is a good move. But these kind of videos are also expensive because there's a cost associated. And I'm going to put up two different videos from Adrian. One of is his thoughts without hands-on of the new Omega Planet Ocean. The other is his Breitling factory tour. The Omega video at this time, when I did this video, had 130,000 views. The Breitling video had 11,000. That's less than a tenth of the views. Now, for 130,000 views, if he made $10 per 1,000 views, that's $1,300 of earnings on that video. For Breitling, the video is $110, which is a huge difference. But what about the cost? Well, that Omega video took Adrian a maximum of 2.5 hours to put together. From him thinking through what he wanted to say, turning on the camera, sitting down, talking, editing, and uploading, and using off-the-shelf B-roll took 2.5 hours. Now contrast that to Breitling. He has to take a direct flight from Edinburgh to Geneva. That leaves in the 6 in the morning. He has to get to Geneva. From Geneva, he has to take a train to Renong. From Renong, he has to take a train to Neuchâtel. From Neuchâtel, he has to take a train to Le Chaux-de-Fonds. There, he's likely picked up and driven to Breitling. He spends maybe 3 hours with Breitling, and that's if he's efficient and not wasting any time on chit-chat and networking. And then he has to go back with all those trains and hopefully catch a flight at 8. Realistically, he's flying in the day before or flying out the day after. With all of that, plus significantly more editing time, he's putting in 18 to 20 hours of work, including travel, for a video that's making him $110. The plane ticket is costing him $200-300, and so is the hotel, plus incidentals. For $110, that's a lot of cost for very little monetary upside. But they all get access. They all do get some variety to their channel, and they learn something. And that access also gives them a level of credibility that has a value to their channel. These kind of press trips are definitely an ethical gray area that you see in all sectors. There's always a balance to this. There is stuff to be learned by going, and I don't believe you by default are compromised because a company pays your plane ticket, but intertwined relationships can be complicated. Do I know of examples of YouTubers who are positively talking about watches and over-representing them in their videos? I hear stories. I know from certain brands that some YouTubers actively charge brands for mentions. They'll say to me, this YouTuber expects us to pay and charges for this and this. It's not common, but it does happen. Then you can start a watch business. Jody has done that. He has leveraged his connections with Chinese factory brands to establish his own brand. Teddy has established a full-scale online and retail operation. I would argue that in the case of Teddy, that the retail operation is the primary source of revenue. His YouTube was never at the center of the business model. His YouTube is a funnel to send people to his primary source of income, which is selling watches. This is a route that not a lot of YouTubers can go. With both Teddy and Nico, the capital to build their own watch business didn't get created out of YouTube. They needed funding from some other source, investors, to help them out, or some other means to get things up and running. In my day job, event organizers sometimes call and ask if I want to speak at some sort of symposium. They'll ask me to talk about work-life balance or the future of HR or the world with AI. They won't pay me any more than a bottle of wine because I'm not Simon Sinek. But if you're an interesting enough YouTuber, someone at Dubai Watch Week might be willing to pay you to present an award or speak on a panel. That's not being done for free. A red bar crew somewhere in London might be willing to pay you to host an event or give a speech. This isn't exactly huge money, but it's not uncommon. Lastly, YouTubers can make money on watch consulting. Christian Hagen is a good example of this. His YouTube presence is limited, to be fair. He's a co-presenter on Time and Tide. His main business is essentially consulting. Andrew Morgan, as far as I know, also does some advisory work for brands, and so does TGV on occasion. Adrian, I think, did something for Porsche Design. I also think he's done something for Hamilton, as far as I can tell. Here, the possibilities are endless if you have an advisory offering that has value. There is a ton more money in consulting than there is in watch YouTube, but it does pose challenges. Because one thing is managing the balance of journalistic integrity when the only thing on the line is access to products. You could probably get the watches in some other way. But I can tell you this. Someone like Christian Hagen, whose primary source of income is very closely intertwined with the industry, has no interest in making enemies. If you go back to the now basically defunct channel About Effing Time, there was a bit where the three presenters, Adrian, Andrew McCutcheon, and George Bamford, discussed which brand they would like to be CEO of and what they would like to fix. The thing that stood out most clearly to me was George Bamford's complete unwillingness to say anything controversial. This is in part because his main livelihood is very intertwined with the industry. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I think I'd have a hard time convincing Thierry Stern to hire me as a consultant after all of the fun I've made of him on my channel. The number of YouTubers that have the clout to build a consulting career on the side is extremely limited. Big brands exert very limited creative control over YouTubers. More often than not, they just don't really engage. Watches as gifts are limited to interactions with small, low-cost microbrands. A little bit of merch never hurt anybody. Paid content isn't as common as you would think, but it does happen, sometimes explicitly and sometimes under the table. The fact is, though, watch YouTube isn't super duper lucrative, but there are earnings options that are perfectly fine and others that come with, let's call them, trade-offs. But now you know what I know, at least. Thanks for watching. Leave a comment. What do you think the state of the commercial side of YouTube is? If you comment about other YouTubers, please be polite, be respectful. So stay classy, like, subscribe. Cheers.